Many of you probably know the song Nelly the Elephant, very famous song, obviously made very famous by the Toy Dolls, who did that raucous cover of it in the sort of early 1980s. What many of you don't know is that Nelly the Elephant was actually based on a real elephant, a real elephant that lived in Africa in the 1970s and was often put out onto display during sort of public events and things. She was almost like a celebrity elephant in Africa at the time. And in the, so I think it was in the early sort of 1980s, Nelly unfortunately got diagnosed with stage 3 trunk cancer. And she'd gone to the doctors. She'd been not feeling very, very well for a few months. And the doctor had diagnosed it and gave her only a month left to live. And apparently the doctor had said to Nelly, you know, what is your dying wish? And Nelly had said that the one thing she wanted more than anything else, as she'd been kind of like a celebrity elephant, was that because she'd spent so much time with humans and so little time with elephants, she'd like to go and actually rest with the other elephants, her brothers and sisters, in the Great Elephant Graveyard. And the doctor said, the Great Elephant Graveyard, that's not somewhere I've ever heard of. And Nelly said, yeah, legend says there is a Great Elephant Graveyard where the bodies of all the elephants over the years have gone to die. And I think, you know, for my own peace of mind, I think that's where I would like to spend my last sort of waking minutes or hours or however long. And that's well, that's a very nice thing to do. I wish you all the luck, and I'm really, really sorry to break this horrible news for you. And Nelly had packed her trunk and left the doctor's surgery and gone searching for the Great Elephant Graveyard. Now, unfortunately, elephants can't write, so there was no actual documentation or information about where the elephant graveyard was. So she began by just wandering around the countryside in Africa, just randomly stopping animals. So an antelope, for instance, and saying to the antelope, excuse me, could you tell me where the Great Elephant Graveyard is? And the antelope, obviously being an antelope, said, well, I'm really, really sorry. I can't really help you. I don't know where the Great Elephant Graveyard is. I can tell you where the Antelope Crematorium is, but I don't really know much about elephant history or elephant folklore, so I'm sorry I can't help you. And Nelly ended up walking around Africa for a good week or so, trying to find this Great Elephant Graveyard. And everywhere she went, it was the same answer every time. Excuse me, can you tell me where the Great Elephant Graveyard is? No, I can't help you, I'm a rat. You know, she had real problems. So sort of thinking laterally, Nelly figured that, well, you know, there are African elephants, but there are also Indian elephants. So she decided to walk over to Asia, and she started wandering around the Asian continent, asking animals there. So she went to China and she asked pandas, and she went to Russia and she asked bears, and every time, same answer she got in Africa. You know, she said to the bear, excuse me, can you tell me where the elephant graveyard is? And the bear said, I'm really, really sorry. I can tell you where the Black Bear Mortuary is, but I can't tell you where the elephant graveyard is. I'm sorry, I can't help you. And another week or so, she wandered around Asia, asking everybody if they knew where the Great Elephant Graveyard is. And unfortunately, no one could help her at all, which was really quite sad. She ended up in North America. To cut a long story short, she's wandering around North America, asking raccoons, and, you know, walked up to ask polar bears. Nobody seemed to know where the Great Elephant Graveyard is, and she was getting desperate now. So she jumped on an aeroplane. It was a jumbo. She flew to Spain. She walked around Spain, talking to native fauna, asking them if they knew where the elephant graveyard was, and there was nothing. No one knew. It was really, really sad. She asked a bull, excuse me, can you tell me where the Great Elephant Graveyard is? And the bull said, no, I'm sorry, I don't know where that is. And she only had like a few days left to live, and she ended up getting a flight to the Midlands, cheap flights to Birmingham, East Midlands Airport. So she's in the East Midlands, she's wandering around, and just as she's probably only got an hour, maybe an hour and a half left to live, she's wandering around Birmingham near the Bullring, and suddenly on the horizon she sees this absolutely massive pile of elephant carcasses, almost stretching up as far as the sun. I mean, she's never seen anything like this. And she wandered up to this massive pile of elephant carcasses, and all around this massive pile of bones was this beautiful, intricate, wrought iron sort of fencing with like railings, and all the tops of the railings below the spikes were made up of little elephants, and each elephant's trunk was holding onto the tail of the elephant in front, and it formed this intricate kind of almost like a chain of elephants all the way around the outside of this. And above the gates there were two huge woolly mammoth tusks crossed, beautiful gold sort of gilt gates with just beautiful insignia, and the words "The Great Elephant Graveyard" written in ancient elephant script above the gates. And Nellie sighed a sort of satisfied sigh, and she thought, at long last, I've found the Great Elephant Graveyard. So she opened the gates with her trunk and made her way inside, and there were carcasses of literally tens of millions of elephants. All the elephants that have ever lived were all piled there. There were African elephants, Indian elephants, there were woolly mammoths, there were all sorts of elephants and their relatives. And the sun was shining. It was a lovely day, just on the outskirts of Birmingham. And she saw a small grassy knoll, and she decided that she would go and lay down for one last time on this grassy knoll. And she was now at peace because she was with her brethren. And as she lay down, was about to breathe her last sigh, she opened one eye, and she heard a sound. And in front of her there was another elephant also lying down on a grassy knoll, and she could see the chest of this elephant rising and falling and rising and falling. And as she watched it, she realised that the elephant was beginning to really struggle to rise its chest, and its chest was moving slower and slower and slower. And she thought, the last thing I'd like to do before I breathe my last breath is to go over and speak to a fellow elephant. I've travelled the world in the last 4 weeks talking to all sorts of animals and creatures, and I've not really had the opportunity to speak to a brother elephant. And so she got up off her grassy knoll, and she wandered over to see the other elephant. She looked down at it, and the other elephant sensed her presence, and the other elephant opened its eyes and looked up at Nellie. And Nellie said to the other elephant, "Did you come here to die?" And the elephant said, "No, I came here yesterday."